I did all kinds. I did westerns. I did a series, a pulp series about well, I thought this was kind of funny and prescient, about a man who spied for the Pope, and it was called The Inquisitor.
And you did that under a pseudonym, didn't you?
You bet, because I never ever wanted anyone to find out that I had written them.
Well, now it's listed.
So now, of course, I've blown my cover.
Right. What was the name?
Simon Quinn.
Simon Quinn. Okay. That was sort of. If only Dan Brown. Well, who knows whether he was studying it? But now his symbologist is a whole different deal. But you wrote quite a few of those. I was looking on your website.
I wrote about 5 of them, and I loved the titles. The titles were sort of spectacularly, sort of Vatican noir.
A genre of its very own.
But anytime you can write a book with the title His Eminence Death, or Last Rites for the Vulture, or God, what were the other ones? Or the Midas Coffin.
I printed them out to bring down here so I could look knowledgeable, and unfortunately I think I left them in the car. But you're right. Matter of fact, it looked to me like there were more like 6 or 7, but they did have wonderful titles.
They did. And then I did things like novelization of the adventures of the Wilderness Family. And the problem was, I got the screenplay, and then somebody else wrote the screenplay. And I got this thing about this family that went up north and fought off a grizzly bear and adjusted. I didn't have enough manuscript to work with. It was a kid's film. It was pretty simple, and I had to turn it into a novel. So I added some things to it, like how to make mozzarella cheese out of a wild bison.
Well, it could be more useful. That's a lot of fun, though.
But you had to have fun, and you had to believe that you were going somewhere. And I believed I was, because I had this book that every time I could get back to it, I continued writing, and that was Gorky Park. Because I went to Moscow in '73, and a year later presented the publisher this 200-some pages of my Russian story, and he said, wait a second, I bought a book about an American detective who goes to Moscow and shows the locals how to solve a murder crime. And you've got a Russian. What happened to the American? I said, well, he comes into it later, smaller. He said, well, you've got a Russian detective, you have a Russian hero. And I said, that's it, isn't that great? Well, we disagreed on that. And he insisted on keeping the book and publishing it, although without enthusiasm. And he would let me buy it back, and so I just didn't give him any more pages. Because that's the power. The only power a writer has sometimes is to say, then you don't get any more pages.
Who was the hardcover publisher for Gorky Park?
It was Random House.
It was Random House. Okay, because I know you published with them for years before you went to Simon & Schuster. Were you with Putnam originally?
I was with Putnam, and then Random House and Simon & Schuster. And so I'm feeling a little bit like a ball player who's starting to add up the number of teams he's been on.
Did you follow an editor, or was this just...
No, the breakup was over Gorky Park.
It was?
And then that I had nothing but great editors. I've never had a bad editor.
You're very
I've never
fortunate.
had a bad agent. I mean, in terms of, it was difficult, yes, to write and survive. But in terms of people helping me, I was incredibly fortunate.
Knox Berger was the agent that suggested you slightly change. You're younger than I am by a couple of years. I know that because I looked you up today in Wikipedia.
You can't trust Wikipedia. I'm sorry. Wikipedia had me down a few months ago. They had me down as having written over 300 adult westerns.
Well, really?
Yeah.
Because they're all just sort of unedited contributors.
It was, and I did 2, Ride for Revenge, and North to Dakota, and I had a lot of fun doing them. But that degree of graphomania to do 300 of them, no.
Would have made you Elmore Leonard with Wings or same thing. Actually, the Western is not different from the P.I. novel. The structure is very much the same, so I can see what that would have worked out.
Well, I always wanted to slap leather. I always wondered where the thing was. I was very proud of myself because they had the right style hat,
Right.
the right gun with the right ammunition with certain characteristics. I threw in the Lakota Indians and some historical figures, and it was fun. You know, it's everybody ought to be the sheriff once in his life.
Absolutely, I agree. Well, the reason I'd mentioned Knox was, I mean, let's agree that we were both born in the 40s, unless there was a serious error in Wikipedia. And it went on to say that you were born William Smith, is that right?
Martin William Smith.
Right, Martin William Smith. But then it turned out there was someone writing with that name.
Well, there were a lot of Martin Smiths who were writing under the same name. We were some conglomerate, this inadvertent, unconscious of itself conglomerate of Martin Smiths. And in fact, right, there is now a pretty good mystery writer named Martin J. Smith.
Yes, there is. That's absolutely true. So the Cruz was what, a family name that you inserted?
Yeah, so I've been writing under Martin Smith, and Knox, the agent, said you've got to get it. You've got to distinguish yourself from these other authors. You're all the same. And so throw in a family name. So I went to Calhoun didn't fit very well. Martin Calhoun Smith.
The rhythm's not as good, I got to admit.
So finally I went with the shortest. I could have done Martin Montenegro Smith or Martin Lopez Smith.
You've got an interesting family mix then, if you could use all those names.
All those names. Lopez was my mother's name.
What was Montenegro?
My grandmother's
That's a wonderful name. Was she Serb?
No,
from Montenegro?
She was Indian and Spanish.
She was. So I always think of Montenegro as the country, that's where Nero Wolfe is from. Yes. So anybody who's a Rex Stout reader is aware of Montenegro.
Yeah, but it's also a Spanish name.
Right.
So I took the shortest family name there was, which was Cruz, and that it's worked.
Well, it has, and everybody always refers to you as Martin Cruz Smith. You know, it's just becomes like James Lee Burke. Nobody ever calls him James Burke.
I should kind of resuscitated the name in my family because actually also my daughter's name was Louisa Cruz Smith, my second daughter. So she was a Cruz before I was a Cruz, and now my nephew is a Cruz, and it's sort of a new blossoming of Cruzes in the family.
Very nice. Isn't Cruz Spanish for cross?
Yes.
So we could, well, anyway, so here you are as Martin Cruz Smith, and you started writing when? In about 1970, if I remember right, you published something. Maybe it was earlier than that?
God, I wrote the Indians one in the 60s, I think, maybe 70.
But of course, when you got it published is not necessarily when you wrote it.
Well, it was for a publishing house where it was like a fast order cook. It became a book pretty quickly. It was paperback, and it was a nice idea. It was an alternative universe idea. What if the Indians had won enough so to maintain an Indian nation of itself, sovereign, in the middle of the United States? It was an idea I liked because I'm part Indian, and I've written actually 3 books with American Indians in the Nightwing.
Right.
Stallion Gate.
Stallion Gate, but is that New Mexico?
Yes.
I think I remember that one is there.
Yeah.
I used to worry that it was an arc until I read all your books. For some reason, it sounded like it could be one of the Russian books, the title.
Well, I've got this book I like very much here called Stalin's Ghost. But then every once in a while I said, Stalin's Ghost, Stallion Gate. There's something, it's an S and a G stuck in my brain. But they're both right for what they are.
Absolutely.
As long as I don't say Stalin's goat, that's the main thing.
That would be awkward,
yes.
Right. Well, so you've done 6 books for, you call him Arkady?
Yeah.
I don't know why I wanted to call him Arkady. Arkady, is that a Russian name? Does it mean anything?
It's a Russian name. It's a traditional Russian name. And it probably comes from the Greek, I would say, actually. As a lot of Russian names did, for the influence of the church.
Sure.
But it probably goes back to Arcadia from ancient Greece, classical Greece.
Right. And isn't the Archimandrite, isn't he some high up in the Greek Orthodox Church and whatever? Sure, the Russian Church stems from.
But I don't think I don't know that the name and that title have that much to do with it.